Good morning. I'm Kyle Beasley, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, and want to welcome you to today's event, our second event in the Chamber's annual Congressional Series. Last week, we were able to hear from U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan, and today we have U.S. Representatives Melanie Stansbury and Teresa Fernandez with us. Both of them relatively new to Congress, and we can't wait to hear their impressions of our national politics and dig into some of the most important issues affecting our state. Everything from our nation's economic recovery to the future of energy, our investment in infrastructure, and immigration reform. First, I'd like to recognize our sponsors for today's event, all of which are engaged, community-minded companies or organizations that want to see our city and state succeed. And they believe that a strong private sector is the key to that success. They are P&M Resources, President and CEO Pat Vincent Calan, New Mexico Mutual, President and CEO Kelly Mixon, Bank of Albuquerque, represented by New Mexico Market CEO Jennifer Thomas and myself, the University of New Mexico and its President Garnet Stokes, including UNM Health Sciences Center, UNM Health, UNM Comprehensive Cancer Center, and UNM Athletics. Western Sky Community Care, President Tony Fernandez. Molina Healthcare, Executive VP of External Affairs, Carolyn Ingram. Janes, its President and CEO Shad James, and Board Member Rick Marquardt. Pattern Energy, CEO Michael Garland. True Health New Mexico, President and CEO Mark Epstein. Molson Corbin, its Board Chairman Del Archuleta. Unirac, its CEO Peter Lorenz. Presbyterian Healthcare Services, President and CEO Dale Maxwell. Esparza, CEO Dale Esparza. Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Mexico, President Janice Torres. Comcast, Vice President Chris Duncanson. Sunny 505, CEO Joni Griffin. Hartman and Majewski Design Group, Principal Architect and CEO Doug Majewski. Sandia Labs Federal Credit Union, CEO Robert Chavez. Decker Parrott Sabatini, Founding Principal and Architect Dale Decker. New Mexico Gas Company, President Ryan Shell. U.S. Federal Credit Union, its President and CEO Marcia Majors. And KOB TV4 General Manager Michelle Donaldson. Again, thank you all to these great sponsors and for your engagement and generosity. We appreciate you. So to formally introduce our featured guests, I will turn it over to our Chamber President and CEO, Terry Cole.
Thank you, Kyle. It's a long tradition at the Chamber that we meet together with our congressional representatives each year to get an update for the latest happenings in the U.S. House. And we certainly hope to be able to see both of our guests in person again soon. For our program today, I'll introduce both of our special guests. Each of them will speak for about 5 minutes, and then Kyle and I will lead a conversation and discussion on 4 or 5 very important issue areas. At some point, Congresswoman Stansbury will need to leave our meeting for an important congressional hearing, and we'll continue with Congresswoman Fernandez. At the end, we'll take a few questions from the audience. So if you'd like to submit one, please click the Q&A button on your screen. Okay, let's get started. Congresswoman Teresa Fernandez took office the past January and represents New Mexico's 3rd Congressional District, which covers most of northern New Mexico. She is 17th generation New Mexican and an attorney by trade, with a practice of her own for 30 years. She was a presidential appointee during the Clinton and Obama administration and served as a White House Fellow on housing issues and as Vice Chair of the Advisory Council on Historic Preservation. She holds a BA from Yale and a JD from Stanford Law. She currently serves on the Natural Resources Committee and Education and Labor Committee. Congresswoman Melanie Stansbury was sworn in as our Albuquerque area representative just a few weeks ago after winning a special congressional election for the seat. Prior to her election to the U.S. House, she served in our state House of Representatives. She has served as a White House Fellow, and she was a science educator in schools across the state and a consultant with Sandia National Laboratories. She holds a bachelor's degree from St. Mary's College of California and a Master of Science from Cornell University. She serves on the Committee on Natural Resources and the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology. Again, congratulations to both of you on your recent elections, and we're happy you took the time to be with us today. Kyle?
Okay, thank you, Terry. And at this point, if each of you would please take about 5 minutes and just talk with us a little bit about who you are and the perspective that you're bringing to Congress, that would be great. Most of our audience today will still be getting to know you, so understanding your background and some of the topics that you find most important will be very helpful to us. So Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, we'll start with you.
Good morning, everybody. You know, I am so lucky to represent the beautiful and beautifully diverse 3rd Congressional District. But what I often say is that there are so few of us in Congress that we all represent the entire state of New Mexico, because we must keep the entire state's interests at heart and in our, in our minds, in our corazon when we're working. I am so thrilled to have our new Congresista, Melanie Stansbury. We are lucky to have her expertise, determination, and grit with us in Congress. Let me start by saying that I love my job, and I'm grateful to everyone who supported me, voted for me, and continued to inspire me with ideas, challenges that we must address. So I'm able to work in Congress at a national level on issues that I've indeed dedicated about 30 years of my life to in New Mexico. We're creating opportunities in places of poverty. We're creating opportunities in rural New Mexico in Congress, and that's what I have always done. Many of you might not know that I actually studied Latin American economic development and planning in graduate school. And then at Stanford Law School, I did kind of joint work on economic development issues and law school before realizing while I was in Peru on a project that I didn't want to live and work anywhere but my beloved New Mexico. So I came home and I got a job with the Nordhaus law firm, which I later left to start Ledger Law and Strategy. My first financings were actually with Santa Ana Pueblo and OK Owingeh for really small amounts. There was a couple of $100,000. Since then, I completed over $1 billion of financing for businesses, health clinics, infrastructure projects, some of which are here in Albuquerque at the Indian Pueblo Cultural Center, where I loved working with your member, Mike Canfield. Because, I recognize that communities need infrastructure, businesses, healthcare, education, and housing to thrive. I'm really excited that HomeWise is in Albuquerque now doing great work. I was with them as chair and on the executive committee for about 22 years. I used to joke that the only way I'd get out of HomeWise is by getting elected to Congress, and they do amazing work on getting people into houses, affordable housing. And I am pushing actually some of those ideas about home ownership in Congress now. And I think with Secretary Fudge has been very receptive. We hope to see something good on that. But so as you can see, this work about thinking about what do our communities need to thrive is actually what drives my work in Congress. I was really pleased to push for the passage of the American Rescue Plan. Before we passed it and before I did a 14-hour markup on one of my committees, I made sure I did a Zoom tour of all of my district cities, towns, counties, and communities to hear what they needed. And we listened. And those issues were included in the American Rescue Plan. I know that you as businesses sacrificed a lot to keep us safe during the pandemic. And it was crucial for those of us who worked and passed the rescue package that we had the aid for the businesses to keep them afloat. We expanded the Paycheck Protection Program. We extended the deadline out. We made sure it could help nonprofits and digital news services. We allocated funds for the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant Program, which was especially important for our state. You know, the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, when I met with the Restaurant Association, they were on top of it. We help people stay in homes, families stay in homes. We beat the pandemic. We are beating the pandemic with vaccinations. And on July 15th, families will begin receiving the child tax credit, which will lift more than 450,000 New Mexican children out of poverty. Imagine that, cutting our child poverty in half in our state. I also want to help save this beautiful place we call home from the worst effects of the climate crisis. So last week, time flies, I spoke on the House floor in favor of restoring protections against methane emissions and pointed to the work New Mexico has done to adopt some of the best rules in the country to curb emissions and protect our planet. But, you know, one of the other things I've done is I've introduced an Orphan Wells Cleanup and Jobs Act, which will dedicate $8 billion to keep some of our oil and gas workers busy plugging old wells that also leak methane. I'll have legislation to make sure that New Mexico receives reliable revenue replacement for federal royalties, because if we decouple federal oil and gas royalties from our education budget, our state can plan better for our children. And I've talked about the need, about the fact that New Mexico, I call it being at ground zero for the climate crisis, but also needing to think about things wisely so that we don't hurt our state. Every secretary with jurisdiction has heard me talk about it. Janet Yellen, from Janet Yellen to Jennifer Granholm over at Department of Energy. And you know what? They've all recognized the importance of taking care of the communities that fueled our nation's progress, and they've each pledged to work with me on a solution. In New Mexico, we also know the value of the arts, where 1 of 10 paychecks comes from the creative economy. And at the height of the pandemic, 63 of our creatives were out of work. So I have a Creative Economy Revitalization Act that would provide $300 million for grants that can go to both nonprofits or profits, because let's face it, most artists don't have their own 501c3. And I'm also putting together a bill to build back beautifully, so the country, like New Mexico, can set aside some of its capital infrastructure spending for the arts. You know, our beautiful state inspires me and inspires our work every day. I'd also point out that on the Natural Resources Committee, I also was fortunate to be elected chair. So I hold a gavel. I'm chair of the subcommittee for Indigenous Peoples. And I also serve on the Speaker Pelosi named me to the House administration, mostly because of my long work on voting rights work. And I'm on the election subcommittee, but unfortunately, we are also now having to deal with the January 6th attack and insurrection. So I have a lot that I've worked on, but I look forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. And we know you're both busy today, juggling schedules for us. And I know, Ms. Stansbury, you've got some various hearings that you're trying to work into the day as well. But if you would please take a couple of minutes to introduce yourself to us.
Sure. Well, good morning in Albuquerque. It's nice to be here with you. I'm Melanie Stansbury, and I'm now your Congresswoman for New Mexico's 1st Congressional District, which encompasses the whole Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce, greater metro area. So I'm grateful to be here with you all. And I know I had the opportunity to speak with you all a couple of months ago on the campaign trail. So it's nice to be back. I really deeply appreciate the work that the Chamber does, and I really appreciate your policy platform and the advocacy that you're doing, particularly at the state and the local level, to address things like education and public safety and innovation and revitalizing our downtown corridor. So thank you for the work that you all are doing and for the service that you do for the Chamber. So thank you, Kyle and Terry, for the wonderful introduction and invitation to be here. I'm excited to be here in this new capacity. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a New Mexico native. I was born and raised in New Mexico. I was actually born in Birmingham. My parents were energy workers at the time. My mom worked as a crane mechanic at the San Juan power plant, and my dad was a welder in the oil fields working up in San Juan County. but they moved to Albuquerque to go back to school when I was about 4 or 5. So I grew up in the Albuquerque area, and my family ended up being small business people. My mom is a seamstress and has worked as a seamstress most of her life. And my sister's dad, who helped to raise me, owned a small landscaping construction company. So I grew up with a shovel and a sewing machine in my hands. And I have a strong sense of how important it is that we create a business-friendly environment that makes it possible, especially for our mom and pop businesses, to thrive in Albuquerque, and how vulnerable they can be to economic downturns. And that is one of the things that has actually motivated my career and my public service to a great extent, in trying to understand how do we best partner with state, local, federal, tribal entities, the private sector, nonprofit, and others to create an environment where we have economic prosperity, opportunity, and a place where everyone in our community can thrive. So as you know, I was serving in the state legislature. A lot of my legislative agenda was focused on Albuquerque area issues. At the time, I served from 2019 until I resigned a few weeks ago. I actually helped to coordinate the Albuquerque area Metro Capital Outlay Program. For many years, people had been doing coordination of capital outlay in Santa Fe and Las Cruces and other parts of the state, but we had sort of struggled to coalesce around a capital outlay program for the Albuquerque metro area. And as we started to do so, we were able to bring together some of the largest investments that the Albuquerque area has seen in things like our public safety infrastructure. So, you know, getting our radios rebooted, a bunch of investments in APD infrastructure in our public schools and our charter schools, and roads and all kinds of things that we need for our community. So I was proud to do that work, and I was grateful to be able to work with many of you on that. I was also heavily focused, the district that I represented in Albuquerque was up in the Northeast Heights off a tramway kind of between Montgomery and Lomas. So a lot of the people that lived in our area worked for the national labs and the Air Force. And I myself am a STEM professional by my background. And so I think that one of the greatest areas of economic opportunity for New Mexico is in our STEM economy and our science and technology economy, whether it's aerospace, whether it's the biosciences, whether it's advanced technologies. New Mexico really, I think, is at the precipice of having a major fluorescence in our S&T economy. And so I was heavily focused on that in the legislature. And then my background is in natural resources management. So I've worked in drought and climate planning much of my career. And I helped to pass a Water Data Act and a grid modernization bill, which I worked with some of you on. And then finally, and this kind of goes back to having grown up in Albuquerque and, you know, this important focus on how do we help our community thrive. And I know the chamber has had a big focus on housing and homeless issues as well. I spent a lot of my time in the legislature focused on homelessness issues, affordable housing, and especially childhood hunger issues. So I am now your Congresswoman. It's exciting times. I was sworn in 2 weeks ago. It feels like months ago already because everything moves so fast here. I'm quadruple tasking as we speak. I have a committee hearing open. I'm on a caucus call. The call just came to go down to the floor to take some votes. So lots going on at all times here. I, as was said in the introduction, have been assigned to the House Natural Resources and Science and Technology Committee. I'm really excited to be serving on those committees because I think, given my subject matter background and having worked in the Senate Energy Committee as a staffer, I can really help contribute. And in particular in science and technology, I'll be serving on the Energy Subcommittee, which is the subcommittee that has jurisdiction over our national labs. So I'm very excited about that, especially because of my focus on S&T economic development. Just quickly, you all, I'm sure, are hearing every day in the news about what's happening here in Congress. There's a huge focus right now during this work period on infrastructure. And I know sometimes it can be a little challenging to figure out what exactly is going on. So I'll just quickly say, because I'm sure it's of interest to everyone on this call, that there's a lot of things happening on infrastructure right now. So the president and Senate leadership have been working on trying to strike a partisan deal on an infrastructure package that would incorporate elements from the president's proposal in the American Jobs Plan. And my understanding is that they have a framework for what they've agreed to and are now sort of fleshing that out. The House is awaiting that proposal to come this way with some more detail, along with a budget reconciliation that would be the vehicle on how we actually pay for all of it. So that's what's happening on that side. But you're also going to hear in the news this week that the House is passing what is called the INVEST Act. And that is a combination of our surface transportation bill. So this is the reauthorization for our roads bill that happens regularly, as well as a package of drinking and wastewater and other infrastructure investments. And I think the hope is that we will, get as much of this through all of the congressional processes we can over the, coming weeks. We're going to work as hard as we can and try to get something passed. And hopefully we can find the will to make the critical investments we need to upgrade our infrastructure. I'll just say, sort of in conclusion, I've signed on to 3 bills now. I signed on to the Vanessa Guillen Act, which is a bill to address sexual harassment in the military and make sure that all of our service members and veterans have a way to feel safe as they're serving. And then I signed on, and we just passed yesterday 2 science innovation bills that came out of the Science Committee. One was the Science Act for NSF, and one was a DOE science bill that will help support our labs to do work that's going to foster more science and technology development. My focus is on the 3 areas that I talked to you guys about a few weeks ago: economic relief and recovery, community well-being, which includes everything from public safety to housing to childhood hunger issues, and addressing drought issues. And I've been seeing social media posts that y'all are getting some rain right now, so thank goodness for that. But the reality is we're facing a really extreme drought right now. So, we want to make sure that we get some relief for our communities. And I will be home starting on Thursday, and I will be home for the next 2 weeks working from Albuquerque. If you would like to meet or share ideas, my district staffer, Sophia Sanchez, is on the call here, and we'll make sure everyone has contact information if you'd like to meet or get together. And during the August recess, my plan is to do a listening tour and travel around the district and do some, roundtables on issues, especially like economic development. So I know that was a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure I could get as much out before we get all down to the floor. But like I said, I'm just really grateful to be here with you all and look forward to the conversation.
Thank you both for those comments. We'll jump right into the conversation. My first question will go to Congresswoman Stansbury. It seems that our political system used to value moderation and consensus building, but now we've entered an era of intense polarization in the public, in Congress, amplifying the extremes and making common ground hard to find. What's your take on all this? How did we get here, and how do we repair this civil discourse? Let's start with Congresswoman Stansbury.
Thank you, Terry. And I do have to let you guys know that I'm going to have to hop off to go down to the floor to vote, but I'll try to put the Zoom on my phone so I can listen while I'm walking over to the floor. And I think probably Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez is in the same situation. But, I think that what has happened over the last 2 decades, 3 decades is, and data show this, that there's been an intense polarization of our country politically. And I think it is largely the influence of large money in politics. People have agendas and they're trying to influence the political system. I am a person who values bipartisanship. I am a person who believes that all humans, all people, all members of the community have good ideas to contribute, and the best ideas and the best solutions are generated by the people who are closest to them, contributing, sharing, compromising. And that's how I did my work in the legislature. Our grid modernization bill had environmental organizations, industry, the labs, our utilities all sitting around the table. And I think you get the best solutions when you bring people together in that way. And so I think the second part of the question is, how do we get back to doing that kind of policy making? We have to have a real commitment to and bring our best hearts and minds to the work and just sit around the table and do the work together. So that's my commitment to all of you, working with you, and know that I have an open door and look forward to working with everyone who has solutions and ideas to bring to the table.
Thank you so much. Let's move to Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. What is your take on the question, Congresswoman?
Thank you for that question. And, I think that in the end of the day, the American people really want a government that works for them. And we saw during the pandemic that this was a time when we really need government to work. And I think that there's a role for each of the players to play. As I pointed out, I'm big in economic development, right? I've started a lot of businesses, helped a lot of businesses, but also realize that the role that government needs to play in terms of providing what I call the infrastructure. What is it that a community needs to thrive? And I think you saw the American people really supporting overwhelmingly on a bipartisan basis the American Rescue Plan. And I think that was great bipartisanship in terms of what the American people wanted. And that really, I think, worked in terms of the families and jobs plan, that there is lots of support for that is very bipartisan. What I'm doing for my part is listening to my communities and serving my communities wherever they happen to live and whatever, their county might be described at, whether it's Portales, Clovis, Española, or Rio Rancho. I'm serving them as communities without any other lens. I need to give an example of, I sit as chair of the Indigenous Peoples Committee. When I hold those hearings about the infrastructure we need, about the healthcare we need, you cannot tell whether somebody is a Democrat or a Republican on that committee of mine. We are focused really on what is the problem, but also more importantly on what are some of the solutions. Most of our bills flowing out of there are bipartisan, they're unanimous consent bills. And I often say that what we need to do is focus on solutions. Sometimes we might not always agree on the cause of a problem, but if we can leave I think this caused it, I think that caused it, but rather it's a problem that needs fixing. Let's focus on the fix, let's focus on the solution. Then we get to somewhere where we could work. I will say that there was a reference to, the large money of politics. I did help draft HR 1, but I put in there things that I learned from New Mexico that are important, like we don't like long lines. We managed to avoid a lot of that. We managed to make sure that we have voting, early voting in rural areas and Native American areas. And I think that those kinds of things are not partisan. Those things are who we are as Americans, that voting is American and that efforts to stop voting is un-American, right? Because that's our democracy. That is the core of who we are. So that is the one place where I draw a big line of saying, this is somewhere where we need to protect voting. We need to make sure everybody has the ability to vote. That is the one place where I think that we all need to come together and say, it is American to vote and to make sure everybody has to vote. But all these other things, I think it's a matter of solution. I have 3 bills now that I myself have authored that are bipartisan, I believe, right now. And then I have signed on to numerous bipartisan bills because they're good ideas and we're working together on some of those bills. We've gotten them through unanimous consent. There's actually a lot more bipartisanship that comes out. There are a lot of bills that we are passing on a bipartisan level in House that they don't report on because it's not newsworthy, but it happens every day. Yesterday our bills were very bipartisan, these technology bills. And I'd love to talk more about that technology because I think it's the innovation economy that we need to do in New Mexico. Representative Stansbury and I are right on that, and we're joined by our 2 senators on really wanting to focus on that. And I am going to, I've already arranged for my vote, I've taken my vote, but I do need to plug in my computer. So I'm gonna just have to get up and go plug that computer in because it's dying.
Okay, thank you, both Congress women. I think at the moment, it looks like they are both otherwise occupied. I know, I'm not sure if Congresswoman Stansbury, there she is, walking to the hearing.
I'm walking to the Capitol. You can see it here. I can walk. I can walk and talk.
Okay, well, that's what I was going to ask. So we'll take you up on that. So switching gears to New Mexico's energy future, the Chamber's been vocal supporters of the Energy Transition Act and believe that New Mexico can and should lead the way in renewable energy production. But the Chamber also believes that we can be number one in oil and gas production too. Can we do both?
So, well, first of all, we are already doing both. New Mexico is one of the largest energy producers in the country. And as we've seen, obviously the large boom happening in the Permian and the recovery of oil prices, especially over the last few weeks, we're seeing record production and also, record income for our state. So that is already our reality. The truth is, New Mexico is in the middle of a major energy transition. We have the capacity, especially with the Energy Transition Act and our Grid Modernization Act that we passed last year, to make major infrastructure investments and majorly increase energy production from wind and solar, both for sale inside the state and outside the state. So that's a huge growth opportunity for New Mexico. I'm a technologist. I believe strongly that we have to address our greenhouse gas and climate footprint. And I think that our oil and gas industry is able to address much of its greenhouse gas emissions. And I think that we have to do that work to transition while also reimagining our economy. So those are some of my thoughts on the issue. And if Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez is able to, I'll pass to her. And I'm crossing.
And it looks like she is back on, so we'll turn it over to you, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez.
I was there when the Energy Transition Act was being passed and debated. And I love the fact that what I often say is New Mexico is we're going to have our Route 66 of renewable energy, right? We used to bring all those cars through here. And that's the kind of capacity we have. It is tremendous. But I also understand that we need to take bold action at the federal level to fight the climate crisis. As I said, New Mexico is ground zero for the climate crisis. The rain we are so appreciative now is a reprieve, and we're very happy about it. But I want to be able to have my grandchildren and great-grandchildren be able to live in this beautiful place we call home in New Mexico. And the market is moving towards clean energy. We've rejoined the Paris Accords. We're going to continue to be doing that. So what we need to do is really be forward thinking on what do we need to do to both protect New Mexico, to grow New Mexico. So one of the bills that I have is actually a save our schools, save our planet. It's to look at revenue replacement for New Mexico. So whatever happens with on the federal lands, that we will be held harmless, that we have 100%, we take a 5-year average and say from that 5-year average of royalties we've received from the federal lands, let's just make a payment to the state of New Mexico for that, sort of separate out, decouple that. That way, whatever happens on the federal lands does not impact our children. We cannot sacrifice our children. I think we need to couple that with investments. I call them diversification investments, with investments in our innovative economy, with investments. And do we look at, as Representative Stansbury said, a technologist, what are the latest things that we can be doing to make sure that we have a strong economy going forward? And that we actually can power that economy. Is it blue hydrogen? Is it green hydrogen? Is it the renewable energy? What is it that we need to be doing? I had a conversation with the CEO of United Airlines. And the CEO of United Airlines, as I was talking to him about, what are we going to be doing? I said, we're not going to stop oil and gas production tomorrow. But we are going to be in a transition, and we need to not do what they did in West Virginia, which is just pretend that coal wasn't on its way out, but actually say, what do we need to do so we're in a good place? I asked the United Airlines CEO, I said, because we're going to still need that oil and gas production for our jet planes. And he said, not really. We are already at 30% biofuels for their jet fuel, and that they're going to continue to be looking at alternatives. And so we need to also look at alternatives here in New Mexico. And I think that that is going to be pretty exciting about what we can do. We're going to be putting more money into our national labs to help us with that transition. And, we're going to be, I could go on and on about the possibilities, but the way to do it in New Mexico is forward thinking. What are the options? How do we make sure we protect our schools, we protect our revenue base, but also create that innovative economy that we're all looking for?
Great. Thank you so much, Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. So let's move to the issue of immigration. And to Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, roughly 900,000 people so far have been stopped by the Border Patrol after trying to illegally enter the US through our southern border. More than any year since 2006, we have a few months left in this fiscal year. There were 170,000 apprehensions in May alone, a 20-year record. The vice president was in Guatemala recently and said, do not come to the US. What's your take on this position and this problem? How do we stop the record-breaking illegal crossings?
I think what we really need to do is focus on immigration in a manner that does not devalue the life of those who are seeking to come to the United States, whether it be as refugees or as asylums or to work. And when we stop politicizing the issue of immigration, we can take a close look and say, what role does it play in our economy? You need to know that I am a co-sponsor, an original co-sponsor of the United States Citizenship Act. I'm original co-sponsor of the DREAM Act and of the Agricultural Modernization Act. And when we talk about immigration, if we actually did this comprehensive immigration reform, we would add $1.4 trillion to our economy. When I met with President Biden, I was fortunate to meet with President Biden together with, I'm on leadership of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and we talked about this issue, and he actually asked us to remind everybody that the immigration reform would add 6 years of solvency to Social Security. So immigration has a very big economic benefit to our country. Immigrants are doctors, teachers, frontline workers, healthcare workers. They during the pandemic, they kept us fed. They cared for us, and they were on the front lines. And I think that if we recognize the essential nature of the work they play, then we'll recognize that's going to be better for our country if we actually go through the process of making sure that we do the immigration, comprehensive immigration reform as set out in the United States Citizenship Act. I would also say that that act is supported by many, many business entities because they realize that they need to be able to have access to the immigrant workforce. I myself have gone to the border. I went to El Paso on a congressional delegation, a bipartisan congressional delegation. We visited various sites. I met with the children who were seeking asylum, and it was hard. It was hard being around those young children who had been sent by their parents to the United States. It was actually the first day of Passover, and at the press conference, I reminded everybody that the issue of sending your children to safety is as old as our Bible itself. Moses's mother placed her small baby on a boat in the Nile in order to save him. Those parents have placed their children on a treacherous journey because they fear that that is the only way they will be able to survive. So when we remember the humanity of who we are and who we should be as a country, I think that changes the focus of how we think about those asylum seekers. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your comments. I've done that walk that Congresswoman Stansbury is on right now. I'm not sure if you're still with us, Congresswoman. Are you? She might be across the street and into the building. So Kyle, I'll send it back to you for our next question.
Okay, thank you, Terry. And so Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez will switch to the COVID pandemic, and you've already talked quite a bit about how COVID relief is continuing to help families and businesses in our state. But one of the issues that's near and dear to a lot of our chamber members as businesses is finding workers to come back. So can you address concerns that businesses cannot find workers to fill open jobs these days?
Yeah, I think that is an issue that has been raised repeatedly across the country by various people. I do note that unemployment is falling. The national unemployment rate in May was 5.8%, which is down from 6.1 in April and 13.3 in May of last year. In New Mexico, we're seeing the same trend where unemployment is down from 10% down to 8%. What we're also recognizing is that there are many who have not re-entered the labor force. We've seen that we believe that a lot of those who have not re-entered the labor force, some of it are women. Women have been the most hit by the pandemic. They had to stay home to care for their children. Sometimes they had to stay home. They're stuck in that sandwich place where they're caring both for perhaps their parents as well as their children. And so we're really focused on that in terms of trying to provide early childcare and childcare services, especially that will be in the American Jobs Plan, where we are looking at making sure that we meet New Mexico halfway as we try we improve our early childhood education here. We will be doing that at the federal level as well, because that has come to us over and over again, that's a big cause of some of the people not re-entering the workforce. Some of it is continues to be, that there's going to be a lot of job changing, we understand. So we're also focused on making sure that we are we are in the middle of reauthorizing the Workforce Improvement and Opportunity Act, so that we'll be able to get potential workers the training they need, the training that your businesses need. So they can become a welder, so they can become a coder, so they can be involved in cybersecurity. We'll be providing those funds so that CNM is really getting ready for that, but I'm working with the colleges across my district to make sure that they're going to be ready for the funds that they're going to have available to them to start training our workforce, because we are hearing that people kind of they want to use this moment to change up what they were doing and to be able to do things, to do different things. I know that that issue of workforce and employment is an issue, but as we continue to, I think, address the underlying causes of COVID, we should see freeing up of workers.
Okay.
Kyle, Terry here. Let's do a check. Congresswoman Stansbury, are you there?
I am. Can you all hear me?
Oh, wonderful. I thought maybe by now you might be settled back in. So just real quick, would you like to comment on immigration? I know it's an issue that's very important to you. Sort of how did we get here and what's the solution?
So on immigration, there's a number of different challenges that our country is facing. This spring, we saw one of the largest spikes in immigration, especially from Central America, and of young people, children coming to our border seeking asylum. And from my perspective, especially as a former federal budget employee, I think being able to assure and ensure that we have the appropriate capacity to help people who are seeking asylum is in part a budget issue. It's about also fixing our asylum laws and also ensuring that there's sufficient resources to address the needs of people who are coming here seeking asylum. And so facilities are not overwhelmed and people's basic dignity and human rights are honored. In terms of the long-term issues around immigration, we've been trying to pass a bipartisan immigration bill in Congress for decades, and we must do it. It's important that we provide a path to citizenship to people who are living in this country so that they can get on with their lives. That we protect our dreamers, and that we have good guest worker programs for people that would like to come and work here in different industries, including agriculture. So we need lots of different solutions to address the different challenges that honor the basic dignity and human rights of people who are here to work, here to live, and seeking safety.
Kyle, back to you.
Okay, thank you very much. So I know that the last thing that any of us want to deal with right now is inflation, including a lot of our chamber members just having come out of a pandemic. But any ideas, maybe we'll go to Congresswoman Stansbury on this, any ideas on how we keep inflation under control?
Well, so I'm not an economist, but I'm watching the markets. I'm watching the consumer price index, and I'm watching what's happening to our employment and all of our different systems. And I think the thing that's really hard during a time like this is that the economy is this vast, complex thing, right? And so it's really difficult, I think, to dial some part of the economy in just such a way without having impacts in the economy somewhere else. So, over the last few months, we've had massive stimulus. We've been helping people get through the pandemic. We're seeing employment start to recover. The workforce is starting to go back to work. Oil and gas prices have recovered. The stock market's doing well. So I think, everyone's trying to find the right balance to get our economy back into an even keel. And because I am not an economist, I don't know all of the answers, but obviously we need to ensure that we don't end up with runaway inflation in this country, because we've already seen over the last several decades, the cost of living and quality of life has been impacted by the, wages not keeping up with the cost of goods and services. So I'm learning. If you all have ideas, I'm all ears, and obviously it's a critical issue for our economy at large. And I think it's a particularly important issue for New Mexico because we have such a large proportion of our population who is low income. And we also have a housing market that's just exploding right now in terms of, lack of real estate stock and an affordable housing crisis. So all of these issues around inflation and around the economy disproportionately impact our lower income families. And so we really have to figure out how to make it all even out so we can get through the next several months and the next couple of years. But I have every confidence that we'll get there. All of the economic signs are good. We just kind of got everything. We got to get everything to cool down a little bit.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez, any comments on inflation?
So, I agree with Congresswoman Stansbury, right? That we're coming out of we're coming out of a period that is unprecedented, right? Unprecedented. And we responded in a way that I believe saved our economy, right? But we're also facing a lot of the readjustments as we come out, as some of the inflationary prices are dealing with. Nobody was flying. Now everybody's flying. And I was on those planes because I had to get back and forth to DC and there was nobody on them. And now you cannot find a seat. But we also have a supply chain issue, and the fact that the United States our vaccination rates are coming on and looking very good. So we can start coming back up. But let's remember, our supply chain is international and nobody is doing as well as we are with regards to, almost nobody is doing as well as we are with regards to vaccination rates. So our supply chains are very much affected. The Federal Reserve believes that the adjustments are short term. We've also heard from the Biden administration that they are not taking their eyes off of this, that they are looking at it to make sure that it is not a long-term inflation, but rather short-term adjustments. And I think that ability to keep your eyes on multiple things at one time is something you need. We need to recognize that complexity is how our world works and that we have to keep our eyes on multiple things. I do believe that we need to continue going and addressing the underlying problems that the pandemic highlighted for us, right? It highlighted our lack of good infrastructure. It highlighted the fact that so many of our community didn't have access to what they needed to survive the pandemic. And, we do need to fix our bridges. We do need to put in that broadband. I'm a big believer in getting that broadband in. I'm part of the broadband task force. We've got $68 billion in the president's plan. And, I talked with Cliff Ryburn the other day, and we're going to get that number up because it's a bigger need, right? So that as we invest in things, that our wages will come up to be able to not let, as Representative Stansbury noted, that there is this big gap that has grown between wages and the ability to, afford what one should, like being able to afford a house. I mean, the fact that our children can't afford a house is a problem, right? So I think that we are keeping an eye on it, and I remain hopeful.
Okay, thank you. Well, one quick question for both of you, and we'll let both of you then get on to your busy days, and I'll pose it to Representative Stansbury first, just because your current situation seems a little bit more tenuous than Congresswoman Ledger Fernandez. But you've both talked a little bit about the infrastructure deal and updated us on that. But do you have any sense of the type of projects that we might see in New Mexico as a result of the infrastructure bill?
So, well, I think that I haven't seen the framework for the bipartisan deal that the Senate is working on. And I think that we're still awaiting some of the details on that. But I think that, some of the big things that I think New Mexico is really poised to take advantage of and is shovel ready for are things like broadband. I think especially because the state passed this legislative bill this last session that will help to coordinate getting more broadband built out and put in the ground, where we need billions of dollars of investments to get that done, especially in our rural and tribal areas. A lot of our rural roads in New Mexico are in really rough shape. We also have some infrastructure road needs within the Albuquerque metro area, especially on the west side. So I could see us getting some of that federal money for roads. And I think drinking water infrastructure is a really big one. Communities like Tohajali, which is of course the Navajo chapter that's on the sort of far west side of Albuquerque, really needs water infrastructure. We have a number of tribes and rural communities in New Mexico that need access to federal drinking water dollars. So I think those will be important investments. But I think that, part of our job, not just as your state representatives, but our and the universal we, is to really take time right now while we're working on getting these packages across the finish line to work with state, tribal, and local authorities to identify what are those shovel-ready projects. So when those bills do pass, we get them on the list immediately. So we'll be looking to work with the Chamber of Commerce to make sure that especially the service area that you all serve has projects that are ready to go when that happens.
Okay, thank you.
So, Representative Stansbury wasn't able to work on the bills because she just got here, and boy, is she moving fast because the Invest in America Act, and she'll be able to do this next year, or else she'll be able to get these funds in because she'll be in, at the beginning of the year. I was lucky in that I secured about $20 million in the Invest Act for transportation and infrastructure projects, very specific projects. And they range from, street improvements in Portales to making sure we fix some of the bridges in that are Navajo children and the people who have to access, can't, the bridges weren't, kids couldn't get picked up by the school bus because the bridges were in such disrepair. And we've gotten some of those fixed, got projects across my district, and got broadband. We've gotten broadband money, very specific broadband money in there for New Mexico. But in addition, New Mexico will benefit some of those things that we were talking about, repair and rebuilding roads and bridges. We're going to really emphasize both resilience and equity and climate change mitigation. That climate change mitigation, there's going to be significant money in there. And that's the kind of stuff that New Mexico will be able to take advantage of so that we're able to conserve the water that we do have. We're going to have a lot more of that power infrastructure that we're going to need for that Route 66 of renewable energy. I talked a little bit about broadband, and people are now recognizing the importance of that clean drinking water. We're going to have a lot more money and also in wastewater infrastructure. Some of that will be coming through the USDA. Some of it will be available to the states. The great thing about what we've done is, and this was stuff that a lot of your places like me, right? Ensured that smaller cities and towns receive their fair share of highway funding. We've got tribal transportation funding increased to $1 billion a year, which is really significant. And I think that, we're going to just be seeing a lot more of, I'm going to try to make sure that the innovation and competitiveness bills, that those focus on places like New Mexico, so that the $3.5 billion of investment in Intel, that we increase that because I want those funds to go to places like New Mexico and not continue to go to Boston or Phoenix. So we're really making sure that there's language in those bills that says, no, New Mexico is one of those places that is going to be going through the transition. Let's put some of those dollars in there. So we're working with our senators to make sure that we get those kinds of dollars into our state for that new infrastructure, not just the shovel ready, but we're also making sure that there is the ability to plan for what we know we need, but we don't yet have the plans for, because there was never ever the idea that we'd actually have the money to build them. So we are also building in design money. And I know the architects and the Chamber of Commerce will like that. The engineers and architects know that there are many things we need that we have not yet planned for. And so we're going to be building some of that money in there too.
Okay, thank you, Congresswoman. And that will have to be the final word for our discussion today. This has been a most enjoyable and informative event. And we really appreciate both of you taking the time to be with us. And we wish you and your staff the very best in Washington, and ready to help and assist on anything that we can help with to create jobs and grow the economy here in our great state. Before I turn it over to Terry for a few closing comments, let me just say that it's been my honor and privilege to serve as the chair of the Chamber's Board of Directors this year. This is an extremely effective organization that does serious and meaningful work to improve our city and state. It's professional to the max. The staff and board members are just a real joy to work with. My term ends in just 2 days, at which point Norm Becker will take the helm, and we know the Chamber is in very good hands with you. So with that, Terry.
Thank you, Kyle. And, let me just say, you have been a terrific chairman for this organization. I mentioned at your last board meeting how wonderful it was working with you, what a steady hand you are, and you're fun to work with. You've got a wonderful sense of humor. All of that was really important because this last year was so challenging and unpredictable. And I wanted to thank Jennifer Thomas. I think she's on today on the Zoom, who is the president and CEO for Bank of Albuquerque. Thank you, Jennifer, for giving us Kyle for the year. He was fantastic. And Congresswoman, thank you to each of you for being with us today. We appreciate the time you've given us, and we look very much forward to working with you as we move forward. So before we sign off, I do want to thank our business leaders and investors and partners for joining us today. Thank you all very much. And to our sponsors, well, we can't do this work without you. This is our last event for a couple of months. We'll see you back in September for our events. In the meantime, you're going to get our normal annual legislative session summary, and it's a book that is the most comprehensive coverage of this last legislative session. It's our accountability piece too, because you'll see the issues we worked on to pass, the bills we tried to kill, and the progress that we made on your behalf. So with that, thanks again to all of you for joining us. We hope you have a wonderful day, a safe July 4th, and we'll see you soon.
Bye.